The Fire of Rebirth. By Lissa. Before the fire. They thought the world would end in war. They pictured bombs, blood, mushroom clouds, sirens. They trained for it, preached about it, built bunkers under their homes with tins and fears and faith. But that wasn't how it happened. The end was far more pathetic than that. It ended in stupidity. In minds so dulled by noise that truth couldn't find purchase. In hearts so fragile that a word, a glance, a mistake, anything not tailored to their comfort, was met with outrage, not understanding. They screamed about justice, then sold it to the highest bidder. They talked of peace, but only if it came in the exact shape of their opinion. They begged for freedom, while building prisons out of glass screens and curated lies. People once dreamed of flying cars, of Mars colonies, of harmony between man and machine. They imagined science solving everything, while forgetting how to be human along the way. Instead, by 2030, they got this: arguments over bathroom signs while forests choked. Censorship dressed in moral high ground. Empathy replaced by algorithmic approval. A world drowning in irony, memes, and medicated numbness. Children didn't dream. Adults didn't think. And no one listened anymore. This wasn't evolution. It was atrophy. The kind that doesn't leave scars, just empty smiles and blue-lit eyes. The kind that doesn't scream, it scrolls. And the earth. The earth watched. It had been patient. It had tried. Fires, floods, quakes, warnings all ignored or politicized. Even the animals retreated, waiting for silence. But there was one thing left in the bones of the world. One last judgment, old as creation. The dragon. He did not sleep in caves. He slept beneath memory, in the raw magma of myth, in the ancient dreams of the world when it was still young, when things had names that held weight. He was the breath of fire given form. The soul of natural wrath. And when the world choked on its own arrogance and called it progress, when humanity forgot how to look at stars without calculating their worth, when even grief became performative, he stirred. Not because someone summoned him. Not because evil rose. But because truth had fallen too far. Chapter 1: The Culling of Difference. They didn't burn books anymore. No, they did something far worse. They forgot them. They drowned them in content, clickbait, noise, false outrage. Stories were no longer read, only skimmed for offense. Art wasn't weighed by its soul but measured by metrics and moral checklists. The world claimed to champion voices. But only the ones that echoed back what they already believed. And if a voice cracked, if it dared to question, to unsettle, to peel the gloss from the rot beneath, they silenced it with velvet blades, cancelled. Reported. Sanitized. Not even the storytellers survived. Especially not them. The poets were made into memes. The painters into digital commission fodder. The musicians into product, their truth repackaged in trends. But the writers, those who stitched raw heart to page, they were aged. Not with years. But with irrelevance. Mocked for dreaming too deep, for crafting nuance when people wanted slogans. What they couldn't twist into comfort, they destroyed. It wasn't fire. It was neglect. The death of wonder came not in war, but in a comment section. It came in mockery masked as critique. In the echoing shriek, if it doesn't fit me, it must be wrong. Individuality was branded rebellion. Rebellion was branded harm. And harm, well, that was the greatest sin. Even truth, that ancient and gnarled tree, was chopped down and carved into hashtags. No more sharp edges. No more difficult questions. Only the illusion of progress, blinding in its performative glow. And yet, underneath this theater of correctness, greed still ruled. Deals inked in hidden rooms. Data sold like souls. Power hoarded, then disguised as virtue. The people raged, but only at each other. They protested, but only to be seen. They tore down statues and replaced them with mirrors. The world did not need fire. It was fire, but cold. Unfeeling. Controlled by hands too small for the levers they pulled. They called it collapse. Not with the awe it deserved, but the same hollow syllables they'd given to wars and economic crashes before, never understanding that this time, it wasn't a correction. It was a reckoning. The oceans had risen like judges. Forests turned to smoke. Skies turned gray, then black. And beneath it all, the sickness spread, a death not of the body alone, but of everything humanity had touched. Their glass towers, their digital gods, their clean wars fought with drones and debts. All of it fell to silence. And when the last machine's hum died, the world sighed. But something else stirred in that silence. Something old. From the mountains long thought barren, from caverns etched in stone deeper than bones of cities, he woke. Because truth cannot be killed. Only ignored. And even then, not forever. Somewhere, beneath stone and soil, beneath silence and forgetting, the dragon opened its eyes. The Ash Father. He remembered when the world burned right. When fire was sacred and not squandered, when humans whispered to stars and feared the forests, not because they were monsters, but because they were alive. Before men caged beasts in zoos, caged gods in books, and caged themselves in glass towers that reached nowhere. The Ash Father rose not with wrath, but disgust. Not because the world had changed, but because it had forgotten. Chapter 2: The Wake of Fire. It began not with a roar, but a breath. A breath long held, deep as the chasm of time, older than civilization, heavier than history. Beneath the roots of the mountains, beneath the bones of forgotten gods, he exhaled, and the stone above him cracked. He had watched long enough. Through the centuries of silence. Through the rise of iron and industry. Through the age of reason, and then the age of madness that dressed itself as progress. He had seen them trade wisdom for noise. He had seen them rename arrogance as awareness. He had seen them cry for justice while kneeling at the altar of greed. He bore no name the world remembered. Only Ashfather remained in the scraps of myth. Whispered by hermits. Dismissed by scholars. Carved in ruins that modern minds called fantasy. But now he rose. His wings unfurled beneath the crust of the world like the arms of a storm. Molten breath lit the hollows of his chest. Scales, obsidian and silver-veined, scraped through time itself as he shook off a slumber poisoned by man's arrogance. He did not hate them. But he had judged them. Their cities, stacked like termite mounds, reeked of excess and desperation. Their towers clawed the sky but birthed nothing but shadows below. They crafted gods in their own image, fickle, petty, addicted to validation. They feared truth. They mocked depth. They fed their children with screens, then wept when they grew hollow. What they could not monetize, they destroyed. What they could not control, they buried in ridicule. And so the dragon came. Not to punish, but to purge. Fire curled along the horizon before his body ever surfaced. Glass melted in skyscrapers before the first tremor struck. Animals fled the forests. Birds vanished from skies. And still, they called it climate change. They called it freak tectonic shifts. They clung to logic as their monuments turned to slag. By the time he emerged, there was no denying him. A silhouette vast as mountains. Wings like eclipses. Eyes, not angry, but disappointed. That cut deeper. He flew. Over drowned coastlines and rusted highways, over craters that once held cities, he spread his wings, vast as storm fronts, veined with ember and memory. His roar cracked the sky. The birds did not flee, they followed. He burned the last of the strongholds. Not the weak, he let them die quietly in their bunkers. It was the arrogant, the ones who still thought they could rebuild the same world, who returned to glass. The world had 1,000 nuclear heads but no wisdom. 1,000,000 cameras, but no vision. Every voice screamed, but none listened. So he silenced them. Not all. Not with extinction. But with fear. With awe. For the first time in generations, mankind fell to its knees not for celebrity, not for content, not for cause, but for something greater than itself. A living myth. An ancient reckoning. He burned what needed to be burned. He left untouched what still held the seed of reverence. Libraries survived. Places of true learning. cradles of wonder. He did not hate beauty. He craved it, the kind made by hands who remembered where they came from. But the liars, the warmongers, the puppeteers behind the velvet curtains, he found them. And when he did, he didn't rage. He looked them in the eyes. And they wept. Because in him they saw what they were not. And what they would never become. Chapter 3 Cinders of Empire. The world responded, as it always did, with violence. Jets shrieked across the sky like silver gnats, pathetic in their urgency. Missiles carved arcs of heat through clouds, their payloads screaming faith in the god of overcompensation. News anchors foamed at the mouth. Influencers spun conspiracies. World leaders pointed fingers like frightened toddlers, and all of them agreed on one thing: kill the dragon. Ash watched the skies crackle above him. Steel birds pierced his airspace. Metal teeth gnashed, tore, exploded. He didn't flinch. One wing B-8 turned aircraft to debris. One growl ruptured the circuits of drones. They sent more. Because they couldn't accept that something existed beyond their control. They called him a monster. Because he didn't fit in their headlines. Because he didn't issue press releases or ask for interviews. Because he didn't bend his neck to their limp-throated demands. They screamed of diplomacy, even as they drew their blades. They screamed of peace, while tightening their missile belts. He scorched their arsenals to bone. He melted their monuments of narcissism, marble towers etched with names of men who'd never bled for anything but profit. He burned what they worshipped. Not their homes. Not their people. But the myth of their superiority. And that hurt more than fire ever could. When the world burns your temples, you call it barbarism. When you burn someone else's, you call it freedom. Ash burned both. He was not theirs to weaponize or dissect or study in sterile labs. He was not another beast to be filmed through a scope or skinned for profit. He was reminder that the world did not begin with men. And it would not end with them. The world raged louder. The networks shrieked. Politicians, now homeless in their power, howled. But in the quiet, in the ash-laden dusk, something stirred. It wasn't a rebellion. Not a resistance. Just a boy. No one important. No one chosen. Not beautiful, by their cruel standards. A limp in his step. Ears slightly askew. Skin dotted with blemishes from a life too real, too raw. Not the kind of child they placed in front of cameras. But his heart, it glowed. The boy was crossing a blackened field, thick with soot and heat, where even the wind had abandoned hope. Behind him, a cluster of children, trembling in the remains of a burned-out shelter. Beside him, a whimpering dog, its fur patchy, legs bloodied. And ahead, Ash. Towering. Wreathed in smoke and embers. Eyes glowing like twin galaxies of judgment. The boy didn't scream. Didn't run. He stood firm, arms outstretched, body trembling, but between the dragon and those who could not defend themselves. His voice cracked like dry wood. If you have to kill someone, kill me. But don't hurt them. No theatrics. No martyrdom. Just instinct. The dragon paused. Here, in the wasteland of arrogance, something pure. Not inbred purity, not polished perfection, not manufactured innocence. Raw goodness. The kind that made angels weep and demons hesitate. Ash exhaled. Not smoke. Not flame. But air. Warm. Heavy. Ancient. He lowered his head until his snout hovered inches from the boy's face. The scent of ash, earth, and time swirled around them. This one. He saw not potential. Not greatness. But honesty. And in a world where truth had been auctioned off for likes, that was the rarest magic of all. Ash blinked once. Then turned. Leaving scorched earth behind, but leaving the boy standing. And in the silence that followed, for the first time, the world paused. Because the dragon had spared someone. And they didn't know why. But he did. Chapter 4 A world too loud to listen. They called him natural disaster. A force of unreason. An extinction event in scales. They did not realize, Ash was mercy. Mercy by fire. Mercy by fear. Mercy for a world too arrogant to ask for it, but too diseased to live without it. He swept through cities like wind choked in smoke. Not targeting the poor. Not stomping through mud-brick villages or the homes of those scraping dust to survive. Number. He burned corporate fortresses. He melted the headquarters of industries that traded childhoods for cheap labor. He flattened ivory towers of influencers whose only gift to humanity was the gospel of vanity. He tore down vaults of billionaires who'd never wept at famine, never lifted a finger for anyone not holding a check. He roasted private bunkers filled with the worst kind of immortality, the one that survives by burying the rest of the world. They thought they could wait him out. Ash laughed. And the sky shook. He found them in stadiums, in megachurches, in marble-floored think tanks where desperation was sold at a premium and hope was a quarterly product. They tried again. Jets. Tanks. Biochemical gambles wrapped in syringes of polished arrogance. But Ash did not bleed. He did not age. He did not forget. He had seen the stars born and swallowed and lived through civilizations that danced in light long before this one crawled out of its oil-slick nursery. In a land once called Nevada, where the desert baked secrets and sins together into glass, Ash landed upon a government research complex so secret it didn't even exist on corrupted satellites. Underground, they stored horrors. Chimeras. Failed clones. Neural weapons designed to overwrite grief. There were no living things there. Only ambition in jars. Ash tore through it like silk. They had tried to trap a god. But Ash was not their god. He was wrath. He was course correction. And when he rose from the wreckage, his wings stretched over 100 miles, embers falling like judgment from the sky. Somewhere, far away, the boy felt it. Not in his bones. In his soul. The boy had returned to the edges of scorched cities, wandering where others fled. Helping animals caught in wire fences. Bringing food to forgotten corners where drones no longer flew. Sleeping under collapsed bridges, speaking softly to children too scared to speak at all. No one remembered him. He didn't mind. He remembered the dragon. And somehow, he knew, Ash was coming back. Not for the people. Not for him. But for what could be. Ash came for the boy in silence. No smoke. No tremors. Only heat, gentle, steady, as if the sun itself bowed closer in greeting. He landed not as a beast. But as something ancient recognizing something true. The boy stood alone in a cracked valley, watching the firelight trickle through the night. His clothes torn, face smudged, hands clutching a broken animal cage he had failed to open in time. Ash saw him. Felt him. The same courage. The same broken nobility. He approached. Massive, smoke-wreathed, his claws carving molten runes in the dirt. The boy didn't bow. Didn't kneel. But he lowered his eyes, not in fear, but in respect. Ash circled him once. Then spoke. Not with words. But with a sound like thunder remembering how to whisper. A name. A true name. One the boy had never known, but somehow always recognized. Ember. Because he was not yet fire. But he could be. He would be. Ash lowered his head. You are not perfect? You are not chosen. You are not clean of this world's sins. The boy swallowed. Ash's voice thundered through his chest. But you did not run. You burned quietly. I see you, Ember. And I will teach you. Chapter 5 A World Reborn by Fire. The sky had stopped screaming. No more jets clawing through clouds. No more satellites blinking like false stars. No more towers pumping poison into the heavens. Just sky. Just silence. Just Ash. The cities were gone. Those that built them, most gone too. Not by choice. Not all at once. But when the rot was scraped clean, when the palaces of artificial gods collapsed, humanity fractured into truths. What remained was real. Ash hovered over the ruins, his wings no longer tools of war but canvases of light, glowing faintly with molten threads of memory. At his side walked Ember. Smaller, but taller now. Still with that quiet defiance. Still watching. still learning. They moved through cracked streets where vines curled through glassless windows and bones of neon signs rusted like forgotten sins. Where once there were beauty filters, there were now mirrors of river water. Where once there were bodies starved for waistlines, there were now bodies fed by soil. Where once there were likes, followers, and curated delusions, there were now faces. Real ones. Wrinkled, round, gaunt, scarred. Faces of people who survived. Ash did not rebuild with machines. He taught. He showed how to dig, not for oil or data or the next cheap dopamine hit, but for roots. For meaning. For something that fed rather than bled. He whispered to soil scorched by chemical greed, and plants rose. He flew over oceans slicked with petroleum shame, and waves began to breathe again. He sang to broken mountain veins once gutted for lithium and gold, and the stone closed like wounds learning to scar. The people who remained? They were not saints. Some had been wolves in the old world. Greedy, vicious, blind. But fire doesn't judge. It burns. And some things grow better after burning. The children came first. Untouched by pride, not yet molded by consumer rot. They built shelters with hands still soft, and planted seeds in the shape of hearts. They laughed at the thunder and chased wind like it was their ancestor. Ash watched. Ember stood beside him. And when a woman tried to sculpt a statue with her misshapen hands, something that looked like nothing but felt like everything, Ember whispered to her, "It doesn't have to be perfect." And it wasn't. It was better. They banned mirrors. Not all of them. Just the ones that lied. No more glass telling girls their thighs were too wide, their hair too curly, their skin too dark or too pale or not marketable enough. No more filters turning faces into avatars of neurosis. If you were fat, you were still fed. If you were scarred, you were still held. If you were odd, broken, unshaved, misshapen, uneven, you were still human. Or something better. Ashfather flew once more across the continents. He didn't return fire for ignorance anymore. He just glared, and that was enough. Entire settlements shook off their old instincts like fleas from a mutt, just to avoid the gaze of a being who remembered what truth looked like. He found remnants of the world that was. Still clinging. Still infecting. A man preaching that only the chosen could lead the new world. A woman trying to bottle river water and sell it under a label of spiritual cleansing. A group building a wall, not to protect, but to exclude. Ash burned them. Not gently. Not nobly. He annihilated their monuments to selfishness. Because you cannot build heaven from the bones of hell. Years passed. Maybe decades. Time flowed strangely now. Ash aged in reverse. He became quieter. More sky than beast. More myth than monster. Ember grew older. His limbs longer, his words rarer. He stopped asking why. He started asking, what next? One day, Ember found a journal buried in ash. A child had written it before the fire. Pages filled with questions. Why can't I look like her? Why does he hit me when no one sees? Why do they say I'm ugly? Why did she leave? Why do I want to die? He read it out loud under the stars. Ash did not speak. But the fire behind his eyes flared once more. Not in rage. But in grief. They built a temple that night. Not to be worshipped. But to remember. Etched into obsidian walls, we were sick. We were blind. We traded love for numbers, wisdom for noise. We starved our souls for hollow gods in pixel prisons. But fire came, and it did not ask our permission. It burned what we refused to see. And left behind what we forgot how to be. At the altar, a single name, Ashfather. Beneath it, he did not save us. He taught us to save ourselves. And the world grew quiet again. Still bruised. Still limping. But alive. Children ran barefoot without fear. Old people sang. Not on stages. Just at dusk. No one took more than they needed. No one was perfect. But no one pretended anymore. Ash watched it all. Then one night, without a sound, he rose into the clouds and vanished. No storm. No fire. Just warm wind and a final whisper in Ember's mind, "You were enough."